What's up, everyone, and welcome to Women's Rugby Treehouse. We've all survived the 2025 Women's Six Nations, and we can officially declare the countdown for Rugby World Cup 2025 on. With me, as always, is my fellow co-hosts and Alev Kelter superfans. I've got Sian and Hattie. Hi, Sian and Hattie.
Hello.
How is everyone? How has everybody survived the Six Nations? Do you feel happy to be out?
Happy.
Relieved? Happy and relieved for me, personally.
That's over.
Just relieved. It felt like it was never ending.
It felt like it was never ending. And with that, since we all survived, even as nominal Wales fans, I mean, unfortunately, more than nominal, we might as well briefly open up with going over the last weekend. We had three matches. First up, we had, Scotland beat Ireland 28-19. France very narrowly fell to England, which we're excited to talk about, 43-42. And Wales did end up earning the wooden spoon, losing to Italy 44-12. Let's start off feeling slightly good. We can briefly talk about Scotland versus Ireland. First of all, do you guys have any immediate first thoughts before we dive into how it happened?
Well, I was a bit surprised Scotland won, to be fair.
This pod was wrong. We love to say it. We say it a lot.
We were big wrong.
We were wrong. In our defense, everyone was wrong. And good for Scotland on that. I feel that we did see some bright spots. The same concerns I think that we expressed before didn't necessarily go away, but I think that there was more positive performance. I think being at home really helped. Did anything stick out, especially to stats nerds?
I think Ireland missed their big stars. They were missing
Absolutely.
Wafer, Wall. Who else were they missing? There's someone else.
King and
King.
Ricky.
Yeah. I think they're such high quality players. Any team would miss those. They really did miss them. I don't know if they were a little bit complacent. What do you think, Hattie? I feel like they might have been a little bit.
So when I was watching the match, like before it started, you had Was came on with the nurses that had looked after her when she was in the ICU.
Which was extremely cute.
Which was very, very sweet. And they delivered the match ball. And then they went into the anthems, and all of the Scottish girls were so pent up, and like a lot of them were crying. It was a very, very emotional anthem. And we later got a little bit of backstory afterwards, which we won't really go into, but there's a little bit of backstory that came out after the match about how there was supposed to be like a cup presentation for that game, and then it didn't happen. I think the players, that was maybe on their mind a little bit. And I think they went into it wanting it, whereas I think Ireland went into that game assuming they were going to win.
It did feel that way, and not that Ireland often falls victim to not preparing. I don't know that it's not preparing. I think it was a little bit of just expectation.
Yeah, I think they just went into it just maybe being a little bit cocky, and they went into the match without having their kind of two star flankers.
Yeah.
In King and Wafer.
And then drive pace also.
Yeah. And then very, very quickly Wall went off with an Achilles injury, and then Tricky went off, I believe, with HIA.
It was a HIA.
Both of those within the first half, I think within like the first 20 minutes actually. And yeah, and it just completely changed the match. And like there was another HIA very, very early on as well. Like it just all changed the momentum in that first half, and they just never quite brought it back. Yeah. And I think whereas Scotland were super, super feisty, they ended up having 2 yellow cards in that match.
I was going to say credit to them. I think it fired them up, honestly. Yeah. Unfortunately, a fired up Scotland tends to lose discipline. That's something we've touched on before, and I think that was really highlighted.
But they were just feisty, and they just wanted it.
They wanted it more.
Yeah, I don't think Scotland really did anything different from what they've done previous. It wasn't sort of like don't get me wrong, I think Scotland did well, but it was they weren't really sort of like, oh, they're going to completely change our game plan, or we're going to do this different. They kind of did what they've been doing anyway. I think they wanted it more, I think.
It's just a hallmark. It's just a hallmark of Scotland. Like when Scotland wants it more, and Scotland, unlike, I mean, people will argue that England has it as well. And okay, never mind. France absolutely has a home advantage. But Scotland is one, I would say, has, when at home, has a huge advantage. I genuinely feel that sometimes it wins it on the day. I mean,
it can do, and I think a combination of things for Ireland, maybe a little bit complacent as we talked about, and then missing some of their star players. I still think Ireland need to clean up some of their enforced errors. Against Wales, they dropped so many balls; it was just insane. If they had tidied that up against Wales, they would have scored a whole lot more. You know, it's little things like that I think has probably let them down a little bit.
it feels like they're on a speed pursuit, like a pursuit to speed up the game. And then the stats that came out from friend of the pod, Hugh, put out a bunch of stats. They were comparing the men's and women's Six Nations teams apples to apples. But when you looked at that and you saw the pace at which both, it turns out, Irish teams play with speed, I mean, especially when you compare most speed metrics with Scotland.
I do think Ireland,
maybe that was it.
I do think Ireland have got the markings of a really good side. I think perhaps the expectations of where they were last year to this year were probably a little bit extended, if that makes sense. I think maybe they need to rein those expectations in and build a little bit more again. I know it's World Cup year anyway, but yeah, I think they have got the makings of a really good side, but maybe just need to still have. Yeah, they got a bit more to go, but certainly I think they've had a decent campaign this year.
I think one of the massive differences between the two sides in this game is the defence. Like Scotland was so comfortable to defend, and just happy to do it. Whereas
another hallmark of Scotland, yeah.
Yeah, whereas Ireland, they missed 20% of their tackles.
And that's mad.
Do you happen to remember if that's kind of a common occurrence? Because I feel like that's a common occurrence for everybody except Aoife Wafer on Ireland.
From what I remember, I don't think it's that big.
Okay.
I think they suffered by missing 4 of their biggest tacklers.
Yes.
And I think that's probably why it happened. But they also didn't put in that many tackle, like their tackle count was relatively low. I think they had like something like 80, 90 tackles, something like that, and they missed like.
Oh yeah, then even a few misses will.
Yeah, but yeah, they did miss about 20. Whereas Scotland, their tackle count, like it was 88% completion, so they missed a few, but nowhere near as much as Ireland, and they put in way more tackles.
I was going to say typical of Scotland also is the extremely high tackle count. And when you consider that they had both Evie Gallagher and Jade Conkle on, there you go.
And McLaughlin.
Oh, and McLaughlin. Absolutely.
And interestingly, Scotland didn't really go for their bench either. So they replaced their front row and they replaced Rona Lloyd, but they didn't use any of their other replacements, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Interesting.
Not a terrible place to be in. I mean, I should take that back. There are positives and negatives to using all of your subs, no matter how you're doing in a match. But to a dumb guy, and I'm a dumb guy, it's pretty good when you don't have to empty out your bench. Especially, we keep saying it, but especially in lead up to the Rugby World Cup, this time, I think Scotland are eyeing. I mean, they've said as much, that the performance that they're eyeing, and I don't know. Explains it to me. Then moving on from that one, we had what I consider the most exciting match of the weekend, considering we had Le Crunch, we had France very narrowly fall 43-42 to the Red Roses, which was fantastic. If you are a consumer of any rugby media whatsoever, you will have been told some mix of something like this wasn't their best team. France got lucky. I don't know what happened, but England will still win the World Cup. I'm curious, how undefeatable are the Red Roses despite almost getting defeated?
Well, they're definitely defeated. Like
they're definitely defeatable, by the way. Cancel us. Just cancel us. They can absolutely be defeated. No, I even tweeted it. Sorry, this is so dumb, but I did tweet out that I was just like, this team looks defeatable. And you can't even say that you were missing your faves. Your faves were all there. And somebody responded to me and was like, you do know that they won, right? And I was like, yeah, so the way the conditional future works, I think that it could happen in the future. I think that there are several teams that Ireland is going to, or that England is going to come up against in the Rugby World Cup that aren't in the Six Nations. So I was just thinking about the future.
Because I also made that comment on Twitter, and I think it's interesting to see England fans make a relation to Wales with the comment. Oh, I've seen Wales fans say that England are defeatable. Well, Wales are defeatable. It's like, well, this isn't about Wales.
Well, yes.
Sorry.
We know.
Your budget is literally like 6 times ours.
Right. I just wish, okay, this is again stupid and not really a rugby comment, but like, could you please be real? Be for fucking real. When you are comparing two programs like that,
I mean, you're not.
Really? Do you want to give us? Let me hold $20.
I feel like right
$20
now,
and then you can say it.
England are professional. I mean, the players don't get paid that much, but they're professional.
They're more professional than everybody else. This is the
They're
point.
more professional than everybody else. Like, I feel like a lot of the other countries, although they've still got contracts, they're like kind of like half professionals, like semi-pro.
But
Yes,
a lot
that's
of the
what they all
players
say.
are still like paid at least double the amount that Wales players are paid.
Right. And
It's
I mean,
just that, it's the number of coaches and the back staff and all the kind of like supporting staff and all the supporting like infrastructure that, you know, certainly Wales doesn't have.
not to mention that, and I mean, we're going to discuss it later because we have a segment that kind of lets us illuminate this more, but also, if you want to be a jerk about it, then I'm going to be a jerk about it. If you're English, you have a leg up in the best league in the world. You have that. Also, if you are English and you are in England, you also have access to the best pathways. Yes, there are lots and lots of reasons that you are that good. The point that everybody else is trying to make is that you are able to be caught up with. And then my other question is, if you are an England fan, why isn't that what you want? Why?
They want to win the World Cup.
I guess it might just be, you know, it might just be that I can't understand it as an America fan, as a Wales fan. Like, okay, but like I'd get bored. I think about like other sports that I follow, and there is one sport that I follow that my team actually is pretty good at. And yeah, there was at one point where we just kept. Sorry. I know it's very weird. But there was at one point in last season in that sport when they were just like beating the brakes off everybody week after week. And I remember at one point I was just like, I mean, it's such and such team, like we're gonna stomp them. And we did. And I was like, okay. I was on my phone half the time, whatever. I like competition. I really love rugby. And I feel like that's why this match for me was the most exciting, other than other more obvious reasons.
Wild. It was wild. When England went ahead so quickly, I was just like, oh, well, okay.
You were like, here it goes.
That's it. Packing in now, lads. Let's go home and have a few bevies. It's just, you know, you just kind of just done. But fair play to France. It was almost as if,
gives us,
you score, we score. You score, we score.
Do you know,
it gives us a chance to talk about France actually being a team of halves. We get to talk more about that because that's absolutely what happened. Yeah. Sorry, go on, Hattie.
I think the really kind of strange thing is that obviously it came down to 1 point in the end. And apart from one player, that is pretty much England starting 15.
Yeah.
And you know it's England starting 15 because that's the way that John Mitchell has talked about it. He specifically went through the motions of kind of rotating the squad throughout the rest of the Six Nations and then purposely picked his best 15. So you can't say that that's not his best 15. That is his best 15. The only difference is he couldn't play Alev Kelter, so it was Emma Singh. Emma Singh,
oh no,
who is
what a letdown.
So it was a bit of a, you know, non-plus whatever. The strange thing about it is it did just come down to 1 point. And the main kind of difference, even though England scored more tries, it came down to kicking again.
Which is also what we want to see, which is what everybody has been asking us for in women's rugby. What more could you want? And for any team to be involved, it was France, which is fantastic because we have so much to talk about Bourgeois just herself.
Yeah. I literally, in my notes, I've just got her name in capital letters.
Yeah, underlined. Same. I do too. I mean, also of note, didn't make the team of the tournament somehow.
Or get
somebody else,
nominated for
somebody
player of the tournament.
or player of the tournament, both of which, if
Questionable.
I were her, if I were her, I would have been posting about it a lot more, because God knows if it were reversed, if the right person was in at 15, God knows that person
Well,
would
if she
have.
played for England, she would have been nominated.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what I'm saying, is that
French.
it just so happens that the 15 happens to be that person. But if that person were shafted, despite having, in my opinion, and again, I'm trying not to get canceled, I love that you might actually see this. It was a mediocre tournament for EK.
It wasn't.
Obviously she never doesn't perform. She's a great rugby player. We have never
When you
denied that.
compare it to
However,
last year, where she like
dominated.
equaled the record and like did all this stuff.
She played well
Exactly.
against Wales. Like she had.
Yep.
That was a really good performance. But yeah,
Absolutely.
yes. I mean, to be fair to her, she did have last year was insane. It's
Exactly.
hard. We're comparing
You
her.
can't.
You can't.
Exactly. You can't have a mega year every year.
Exactly. So even like, okay, for her, it felt a little bit off that, but it was still pretty good. But yeah, it's insane.
It's
Wider
just like,
tournament.
you've got somebody who played like EK, like she came off the bench in one match, played 3 games from the start, whereas Bourgeois played all 5 games, played every minute of every game. I think ended up being the top point scorer. She barely missed a single kick.
The kicking was
I think she had like one game where she was like a bit iffy off the tee, but even then, like only missed like 2 or 3. Like she's just such a good kicker, and
It's so young.
she's
so young.
What, like 21, 22?
22.
Yeah, it's
Turned 22 right before the tournament. Yeah.
But yeah, so she didn't miss a single
kicking,
kick. England missed 3.
of those kicking, like to take the kicks at that age.
Yeah. Especially when, I mean, you had other people around, not necessarily that they are always better, but I know Arbez kicks. I know Pauline Bourdon-Sessu can kick like anytime. But yeah, they put full faith in her, which rules. I think that she also like came into it well. But so many good things to say. Really feel for Marine Ménager for the last minute. Man, we were talking about it before recording started, and this isn't to start a debate because we don't really know, but it does feel like sometimes the ref picks and chooses how ref they want to be. And I just wish maybe they could have like turned the other cheek just this one time. It would have been really fun to see if it had continued just like 90 more seconds. I'm really curious.
Never happened.
But I think
for some reason it only ever happens.
I'm going to complain about my big gripe, which has been my big throughout this entire Six Nations, which is they brought Pauline Bourdon-Sessu off at 62 minutes.
It was such a weird choice. Oh, I wish they would just tell us if it's an injury, because we know that it's probably not fitness.
Yeah, and
it hasn't been before.
Yeah,
we all said it at the time. If she'd stayed on, even another 10 minutes,
there's a very good chance
the game
that they would have won.
Because it took them a while. Like they ended up scoring, I think, like 7 minutes after she came off, and then like 10 minutes
and
after
that was it.
And it just feels like actually if she'd stayed on 5-10 more minutes, they could have got at least another try in while she was still on. Like just rack up those points a little bit more, really kind of put it to England. Natasha Hunt wasn't on at that point, and just really, really kill them with it.
You could have really nailed it home. I think.
Swear, France, it's frustrating. I think it's a coaching thing. We've talked about it before.
The coaches are own worst enemies.
Like
it must be,
but the players, like what they can do, right? They've obviously got the players. It's so frustrating because there's obviously, it's like they've got all the jigsaw pieces and they're just like trying to chuck them anywhere. They're not even trying to put them.
Well, not even though, because obviously it was working so well up until she was pulled off. And so my question there is,
yeah, but they haven't. France haven't been great the whole tournament, have they? Like this game.
No,
it did feel
their best performance.
This was by far their best performance.
They haven't played like that in any as a whole. I don't think.
No, I think I said to you guys, like, have France been playing like big brain time and purposely playing like shit for the rest of the tournament just to like throw England off
Kill it
because
all,
they were
everyone.
so much better.
Yeah.
I understand.
Into a false
I
sense of
understand where you
security.
come from, but I couldn't see France doing it. I couldn't see France putting aside. Oh, I got in trouble for like I didn't actually ever call France arrogant, but I got in trouble for somebody thinking that I was saying France is arrogant. I'm not, and I don't think they were arrogant this time either. I think almost the opposite. Well, I wonder if it's almost the opposite because I cannot. I really wish they would tell us. I really wish France wasn't so hard to decode. I need to know why she's coming off because the look on her face isn't one of like we all know what a rugby player who is begging to be taken off looks like. And it's never that. We don't know of an existing injury. I feel like God knows if we did, they would have been targeting it.
It has to be tactics.
Right. But then so my question is what? What's the tactic?
Thought is that they don't have a lot of depth underneath her.
True.
And so they're trying to build that depth and make sure that Chambon gets game time, which I would be fine with in every game apart from the England game. The England game
is just one I wouldn't have done it. I understand though if they viewed because we were looking at what their warm-up games were otherwise, and I would understand if they viewed this as the last shot to get like serious contested experience against England. And if you want that because you're looking forward expectationally, in fact, I don't even, I should have pulled up all the pools for World Cup. But if you're worried about ever coming up against the Red Roses again, I guess I understand. But why not just wait for your warm-up match? Like, I understand Australia isn't the same. I think France is doing Australia, and didn't we figure out it was like Ireland or Scotland or something?
For what now? In the World Cup?
No, for their warm-ups, for their summer warm-ups.
I mean, unless
everyone.
Yeah, I mean, Australia also, we are going to talk about that in a bit because we have a more natural time to talk about Australia as a team, but there is yet more evidence that like they're taking this very, very seriously, and that's something to worry about. So, if I were France, I'd be glad that I'm practicing against them, but I understand that it's not the same pressure as playing against Mo Hunt in the Six Nations, but
France are in Pool D for the World Cup. I've just pulled it up, and they're against Italy, South Africa, and Brazil.
They've got a nice.
I would say
that's a nice place to be if they're France.
If you're France, you'd be happy with that group.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking at when the tries were scored, and England didn't score after Pauline Bondon-Sansus came off. So
maybe that was why.
My only thought is like, so England were on 43, France were on 28. So have the French coaches given up? Like, I really can't figure it out.
I don't know, but France, I've been watching France for a very long time with even the men, and they can be like this. Like you can't, it's almost as if you
just can't figure it out.
Can't figure it out. And sometimes something just clicks. And like, it's almost as if they're saying, oh, well, fuck whatever we were supposed to do. We're just going to do it this way. And then they just do it. And then it happens. Honestly, it's wild.
It is. It feels a little bit, and because we don't know, like I don't like going back to this because I really don't know. I don't know what the fuck the coaches are thinking. But it does feel a little bit reminiscent of something that we know that France has felt and acted like in the past of at one point you just have to throw everybody in the deep end. And like, sorry, I know this is hard, especially if you're like Chambon, for example, like, yes, this is a hard match. But because we know that you're going to be looking at hard matches again for the World Cup, we're just going to get you used to it now. And okay. I guess that really speaks more to like, which is most important to you, the Six Nations, your overall points in the world ranking, the World Cup, what is it? And we don't know. But I think how they ended up losing, I guess from your breakdown, it feels more obvious than it did to me 10 minutes ago.
I still think it's strange, but there's always the kind of thought of
they always want to win the Six Nations.
France have a very different outlook to international competitions than other countries. Domestic rugby is a lot more important in France. Whereas I think in the Anglophone world, we look at international rugby being top tier and club rugby being far below. they see it as much more neck and neck, or sometimes
which
even
I think has served them
above.
very well.
Yeah, which serves them really, really well. And that's why you see the men's teams in the summer. You don't get Antoine Dupont going on. You don't see Matt going on those summer tours, because that's when those players have their rest. That's the development tour, which obviously gets the Southern Hemisphere sides very upset and gets their knickers in a twist. But you know, the women's team don't necessarily have that option right now. I'd love to see it in the future. I think they could be one of the first teams to really go full throttle with an A side. New Zealand and Australia have done it a little bit. But maybe that's why they're kind of doing that very early, but I don't know. I really don't know. I'm trying to like think of all the reasons why in my head, and that's all I can think of.
There is also a question to me, and I mean, this is going to be an open-ended question because it's one that we just don't know, but France is also, I hesitate to say unique because other countries do it. We can especially contrast with Ireland, but France is definitely on the spectrum, is much more towards the sides of constantly merging 7s and 15s, which we, us three, as we know, because we all talk together about this a lot, we don't necessarily think it's working exceptionally well for Ireland. I can't necessarily say that it's not working for France. I just don't know if this, it feels like we need a longer term to see if it does anything in the longer term. But we constantly saw 7s coming back. Some people are coming in mid Six Nations. It doesn't really matter to them. They don't necessarily see the difference between 15s and 7s as stark as, for example, we do, but as other teams do. And I wonder if perhaps at coaching level, they see the depth across both codes and just say, okay, if we really, really, really can't get a better scrum half, like we'll go take her from 7s. I don't know. They did it with Grisey. They said we can't make a better one.
I think they do that occasionally, but what I see more of is that they will take people out for a whole season. I think it's only in like very select instances where they move people mid-season.
Did Okemba play Elite One? I don't think she played Elite One this season, and then no, so she must have been. So I think it was just Okemba and Grisey. So you're right, it's not many.
It's not quite as widespread as Ireland is.
Okay.
And I know in kind of the lead up to the Olympics, they had like a year, 2 years where they all of a sudden lost loads of players, and it's because they went off to go play 7s and they weren't playing 15s at all. And then as soon as the Olympics was over, you had all those players come, you know, most of those players come back. So they don't quite do it the way Ireland do it. I think they do it in a much more sensible way. They do it kind of more like the USA have done in the past, where you have like, you're contracted for this year and this is who you know you're playing unless you're gaining experience or we really, really need you.
Actually, that's exactly what they're doing now as well. With one notable exception, all of the 7s players, even the ones who got the bronze medal, are all playing at least a full season at WER. Some of them played both a Premier 15 or PWR and WER season. They very much said you can't be double dipping anymore. I noticed, and not just because of horrible timing, which we'll talk about later, but there's very little 7s camp crossover of I just got done off the 7th circuit and I'm just going to bounce on over. In fact, there are none that did that, but there are others. There are other circumstances.
So I think with like the exception of Ireland, the mood towards that is maybe changing slightly.
So I think we're going to learn a lot
this World
about
Cup.
Over the World Cup, because we're going to see all of the different systems that cross over at all. There are also a few countries that, because of either the structure when it happens to come to GB, that you just don't have a lot of crossover anyway because you're Wales and you don't get to put many in the program anyway, or Scotland. And then there is the New Zealand model, which really hard separated them to the point where there are problems. Australia is so bad that people's own managers are saying, yeah, no, we're not doing that. I am excited that there's a chance that this World Cup could finally like draw a really hard line between those who do and those who don't. This pod has always been of the opinion that like it's fine, they're all still rugby players, but like, oof, be careful. And you know, we see with like Aaron King being out, maybe it doesn't work that great.
It's a different mentality. You know,
different
it's
game.
not just, you know, there is the kind of mechanics of it, but in, you know, the fitness, it's very different to play 80 minutes in one go than it is to play 7 minutes and then have a break and play another 7 minutes and then play another lot of that later on in the day.
And we have some evidence from some recent internationals that we're about to dig into that are really going to illuminate that.
But it's a different mentality, and I think that's where you kind of see it. It's mentality of tackles, it's mentality of jackling, it's mentality of where you're putting your body.
There are rucks, for example, is one thing that we are seeing is, I mean, at least what I'm about to talk about is a huge difference.
But anyway, we have opinions about it, which some people don't like our opinion. That's fine.
Fair.
But
I think we're gonna see probably evidence to both sides, but you'll be able to compare and contrast better after the World Cup. Especially if we see who goes where in this interim now that, and instead and in fact, the last match of the Women's Six Nations was it was a great win for Italy. Huge scoreline over Wales, 44-12. Italy, I feel, just kept going on the same high performance that we saw the week before and didn't expect. Good on Zebra Guy. There's a chance, and some coaches, there's a chance that he just may be a good women's coach and not a good men's coach. Great. I'm so sick of it all being that you're great at coaching men and terrible at coaching women. I'm glad to see a difference.
Oh, fair play to Italy. Totally.
Fair play.
I mean, we don't,
The stamina, no, I mean, the stamina was way higher. The cohesion was way higher. Yeah, there's still some work-ons, but it seemed a lot calmer than their first few matches. Good on them. I wouldn't say. Oh, sorry. Go.
They look better than us in every aspect, really. Pretty much.
It was a better performance, frankly. Luckily for the time length of this episode, there really isn't a lot that we can say about Wales that we haven't said in the past few episodes. I think
it would just be yelling and just wails of despair.
It would just be sighing a lot.
The only thing I think we can say is that losing wasn't a massive shock to us. I think the score, I think that was the main.
Yes, that is really worth mentioning. This is the highest scoreline Italy has put on Wales in a long time. I wish I had looked up. It didn't occur to me. I wish I had looked up how long it's been, but we are used to. I think it might have been ever. I think that was what Squidge said. But
yeah, it was disappointing. Understatement.
It was really disappointing. Everybody came out, even the captain came out and said something almost helpful about it just not being good enough, and it wasn't. And it was almost helpful. You know,
I think Sian and Hattie's
I think Sian had said it the best. Yes, that is a much better way. In fact, I would say this pod just cosigns what Sian had said, because it's exactly right. And it sounds, I know that it sounds, you know, we passed these opinions on through our wider rap family friends, and some of them pushed back on it a bit, that it's unfair because they have a new coach. It's unfair to them to adjust to new systems so quickly. Okay, they've also had contracts for 6 years. Like Sian had said, most of them, this is not the first time playing together. Something like a quarter of them literally just won a championship together. There's only so much that you can blame on it being a new coach. It's not like and by the way, it's not like they were playing a brand new system. In fact, Sian said before they started that he was like, I understand because of the constraints and because of what we're building from. And by the way, mid Six Nations, he was like, I didn't know it was this bad. Mm-hmm. Because of that, he was like, I'm really not changing that much. Mm-hmm. So you don't even have that excuse. It wasn't good enough. The fitness isn't there. Luckily, I'm really glad that he came out and said afterwards that there are going to have to be some hard conversations. There needs to be. And it needs to be some names that will make people sad. I'm sorry.
Yeah. We've been talking about this before, but I genuinely think he'll pick some of the under-20s.
Yes.
The World Cup.
And that's, he came out and telegraphed as much in that weird article you found, Dragons Online or Dragon Live or whatever. Um,
website.
Dragon's Lair, something. No, not Dragon's Lair.
Dragon Sport.
We know that he's been including some of the under-20s in match day experiences and stuff like that. He's been going to a lot of their matches. He's been more heavily involved in like the Celtic Challenge matches. Like he's got his eyes. He has been watching. So yeah, I do think that he might drop. Well, I do think he'll pick some of the under-20s players. The big names that he'll drop, I have no idea at this point.
I mean, I was going to say we have a few suspicions. Some names that we would love to see. We would love to see Savannah Picton-Powell, Kath Bridge. I mean, she had a little bit of quiet time when she was in. I admit that she's not the solve for everything, but it's another 15 you can rely on in Kat Richards. Hannah Marshall at 10 it's worth giving a shot. They all have also some critical downsides that you would have to work on between now and then, but my God, anything has to be better.
I agree, and I think you come to the stage as well. We're probably going to lose matches anyway. I think one thing I don't
when you look at the pool,
yeah, exactly. But what I don't want to happen, and it was a bit the same for the men in the Six Nations, is like you don't want to just chuck a load of kids in and then them get hammered.
Right.
You can't just literally put the under-20s in. Because they'll just get whacked and it'll be they'll play in a
That's a horrible experience too.
Horrible experience.
In fairness, one of the few things that WRU did right is that we do have a decent, at least, warm-up schedule. It's insane to send them to Australia and then send them right back to the UK. Whatever. Other than that, at least Australia is good practice.
Yeah,
we know.
I expect that he might try out some of those players against Australia.
That's what I was thinking, is I think that they will absolutely be on that plane. And
I think the nice thing as well is that Sian is a very tried and true development coach. He's worked very much so pathway. And he also knows quite a lot of the players that are in. I was going to say pathway.
It really helps that he knows the Hartbury pathway, and even he even knows Bears Center of Excellence folks, just because he's shopped from there himself as a coach.
So I am concerned. I have to be honest, personally, as a fan, I've somewhat written off the World Cup to an extent.
I have as well. I think it's kind of everything feels too soon at the moment for me. I'm kind of just like,
exactly.
You got to write off this year, which is a shame because of the World Cup. But
I'm kind of like, if
I'd rather us go through this pain and Sian build the blocks
and then have a real shot at 29.
Yeah.
I feel like we really need kind of a big cull, coaching, backroom staff, certain players.
A strong full cycle to bounce back as well.
Yeah.
Needs to, I mentioned it a bit earlier with England, the background staff and everything, that all needs to be where it should be. I don't think it is.
Nothing about WRU or nothing about Sian coming in was ever going to be like turnkey. It wasn't that everything else was working and there was one problem. So
exactly, yeah.
The good news there is, even if you are a Wales fan, there is a huge chance to be a fan of other teams, because we are moving right into the Pacific Four across the globe. For those new to the Pacific Four competition, it is a competition between America, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Unfortunately, it makes it kind of hard to watch some of them, but super worth it. We have started off the competition already, and fortunately, I do get to have my preferentialism, and we do get to talk about both the warm-up USA-Japan match, and USA and Canada have also kicked off Pacific Four first round, which was USA versus Canada over this weekend. First, we'll talk about Japan and USA very briefly. That score ended up being a Japan win, 39-33. And we'll get to the USA-Canada match in a minute. We all watched the Japan match. I thought it was fantastic. Fantastic if you are a fan of developing rugby, and especially a fan of Japan's upward trajectory. I've ranted on it on other podcasts that I think Japan is the one program that I wish every other program would look at, because I feel they're the one that has done everything right. What they really did is just dump in a ton of money and hire the absolute best they can get. And kind of, they were always okay with progressing slowly But like, ugh, I hate to say it, but slow and steady really helped them. They were patient in this match. They played with more rugby IQ than I think I've ever seen from them. Their speed is unmatchable. Their footwork is unmatchable. Handled better than USA. USA, you know, we had some problems there. I really appreciated what Kate Zachary came out and said after. There were a lot of process problems. There's a lot you can say about America, and you know, we don't get together to practice very much. Everybody plays literally across the globe. Japan, on the other side, does the thing that keeps working for every other team, which is they set up a good pro league, and now they all stay in Japan. They do.
Wild.
Yeah,
a bunch
of people came home from PWR and did not play. Minori Maro, or Minori was the one I was thinking of. But they're, in fact, yeah. Oh wow. I can't
There's
think
been
of any
very
of them that
few
were playing
Japanese
this.
players in the PWR this year.
Any.
Yep.
I watched the game from what I could watch when Rugby Pass actually worked. I did really enjoy it. I love Japan. I love Japan. I just love it.
It's an easy team to like.
I've always loved Japan though. I just love anything Japanese. But like,
oh yeah.
they're really enjoyable to watch because they just want to play. Their enthusiasm and they just want to play is just awesome. They impressed me in the WXV. They impressed us all, I think. We were talking about it. And I wanted USA to win, but at the same time it kind of I was kind of enthused that they seem to have continued that development from the WXV.
Yes.
They have definitely improved since then. And it seems, the fact that they're competing, I mean, USA are quite a physical side. They've got physical players and they're competing with that physicality. I honestly think Japan can, if they continue this, they can just get better and better.
The thing that kind of really blew me away about Japan is that they learn in the game so quickly. So they would learn.
They adjust so well.
And so like, they would notice, oh, okay, the USA don't necessarily, they've got a hole in their defense here, or they leave a gap here, or they do this, or they do that.
Exactly.
And they would pick it up and they'd learn from it and they'd go. And that was how, so they had quite a slow start. Like it was 21-7 in like the first half an hour.
Yeah.
And then they brought it back, and it's because they were learning in the game. And that was something they really kind of struggled with in WXV2. They learned game on game, but they didn't necessarily learn and adapt in the game. Whereas it was probably one of the best performances for that skill that I've seen in a really long time.
The resilience was notable.
It was just incredible.
It's also really refreshing to watch if you're a women's rugby fan, because we've talked so much about it that so many teams, even if it's the first half or the second half, tend to be a one-half team. And that you'll see weird fluctuations in tempo of the game. What I really like about watching Japan, and it's a facet of that learning and adapting along the way, and the resiliency, is that you stop wasting time on stupid things that don't work, and because of it, your fitness stays up. And this is something I want to keep. Well, it's something I want to touch on because, wrongly, I think people really focus on the true fact that Japan, especially Japan women, but Japan men as well, there is always a pretty notable size difference with their competitors in terms of rugby nations, especially their nearest competitors. They play the most. They play Fiji a lot, and that's just a complete different physicality. But it doesn't always matter. If you're faster, if your handling is better, if your error count is way lower, all of which happened, by the way, in the USA match, it doesn't really matter, which I know is what pisses people off, because it says something that they really don't like about rugby, which is that it really doesn't matter if you have the biggest muscles. It's great to have. Obviously, they have it. The women are all, hard as steel, but it only matters so much. I mean, that was why it's what makes them so fun to watch. I could just keep going on.
The odd thing, though, is I don't necessarily know whether the USA took their foot off the gas a little bit and kind of went, we're so far ahead now, we can kind of bring it back. And I think something that they weren't expecting was for Japan to adapt, because it's not something you see in women's rugby. I think most women's rugby international squads, especially,
you have a plan.
They go out, they play that game, and that's all they're going to play, unless you're France, in which case you're going to do absolute chaos. But
but even that is a plan.
But even that's
the
plan, yeah. They're still not adapting to the game that's in front of them. They're still playing their own game.
That's exactly. Japan is so good at playing what's in front of them.
Yeah.
Which is like a core rugby skill.
Yeah, they play what's in front of them, and they play whatever the other team are bringing at them. And it really kind of threw the USA off, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's not something you see in women's rugby.
And it's very hard to train against.
Yeah, because
it's very hard to say anticipate them anticipating you.
Yeah. So it was really, really strange. The absolute standout for the USA, though, and she was a standout in both USA games, was Alev Kelter, my close personal friend.
Personal friend of the pod.
Yeah, who I've met once. But my close personal friend, Alev Kelter, who was just incredible.
She's so good at rugby. She's so good at rugby, y'all.
She is just amazing. Yeah, she just does everything. She does everything.
She was standing in at first receiver, crashed.
I was just gonna say
nice hand.
First receiver.
Like yeah, she's just
and I mean it's a phrase that we get annoyed with, especially when they say it in sevens, because I feel like it's overused or whatever, but like I don't know how else to say it. She's everywhere. Yeah. Which really isn't true a lot of the time when people say, it's like really impactful in the moment. But she's really from touch to touch, like all the way across the field. All the way, I mean, never mind. We're going to go into the Canada match in a minute, but also can go from try line to try line.
Like teams kick, and it always seems to be Alev that takes it. No matter where they kick into, it's always Alev. which is particularly surprising, because the one thing that you would think that a team would never or that would actively plan against is don't kick to Alev.
Don't kick to the best center in the world.
Exactly. Don't. And I mean, one of the best ball carriers in the game. Period.
Incredible. I think USA would disappointed to lose, but I think it would.
Yeah.
Looked a little bit rusty at times, I think. I don't know. I think it was a case of, like you mentioned it earlier, not being together that long.
And that's, And both Kate.
A little bit of complacency, I think, because they got into the lead.
Yeah.
They scored early and, got into lead, build up that lead, put the foot off a bit.
I think as well.
Game time trait, like what's the word? Like kind of lack of game time practice.
Their game management was just really odd, and I think their game management from the coaches was a bit off as well, because they brought their forward subs on really early, like within 45, 55 minutes. So by the time that it got to 70 minutes, those forwards kind of like it lost the impact.
You had worn them out.
Yeah.
And like Japan then brought their forwards on.
Yeah. And it was over.
And it just felt.
That's a really good point.
He has his energy, right? So
yeah. And exactly. And that really speaks to, especially if you're going to talk about bodies mattering so much, one thing that you can never say about Japan is that they're not conditioned. They're always conditioned. It's a team that I don't ever think of like ever having stamina problems, which also I think speaks to that they play in an adaptive way rather than we're going to take this plan, we're going to bash it into the wall, and if it doesn't work, we're just going to break our bodies. And then you see something like with Wales, where you just try the same thing over and over and over, and by 65, 70 minutes, they're completely dead. And that's 10 minutes to work with. And in this case, because of the planning and the management, it was even earlier. And they took at least 20 minutes of just like absolute battering to the USA, and it worked.
The one negative I felt about Japan, and it is a bit of an odd one, I didn't think their wingers were very fast. Like they weren't noticeably faster than the rest of their backline. And one of their wingers, I can't remember whether it was their 11 or their 14, and there are no stats on this match available anywhere.
Yeah, which is really disappointing.
In fact, I can get stats for Guyana versus Cayman Island men, which took
Thank you, Rugby Pass.
Thank you, World Rugby and Rugby Pass. That's really the information that I need.
I mean, Rugby Pass didn't even want to show half of the game itself.
They also didn't want to show half the game.
1 a.m. or whatever time. Yeah.
That point though does make me wonder. So of note, only because when you're a smaller program and a developing program, I will say Japan is a team that has very little 7s and 15s crossover. I wonder if they've completely given the speedsters to 7s, because they're taking 7s really seriously. They were in the championship.
It's
weird otherwise. You're right.
She was just quite like she managed to get the try. And I
But
can't
not because of
remember.
bare speed.
Yeah, I think it was Ortiz that managed to catch her, but like
Mhm.
Ortiz was not going full pelt, like,
It's interesting.
and it was more footwork that got her over the line, but
Yes.
he was not quick. And I was like, you have to play Ireland in the World
Yeah,
Cup.
but that could also be a question of working smarter and not harder.
Yeah.
Because if you realize that because on the other side of it, if you notice that like Olivia Ortiz and Ortiz, for example, is I really rate Ortiz as a scrum half, but the speed for her isn't her biggest thing. She can be quick, especially on a straightaway. But for example, if that's something you've noticed, and I think the try that you're talking about had to have been like the 72nd minute.
Yeah, it was quite late on.
Yeah, it was quite late.
I feel
And
like
if
it was Ortiz, but it might not have been.
well, either way,
It was.
just it clearly must have been somebody that she saw in the moment while she was deciding how she was going to run in. She was going to say, I can or cannot beat her in just a foot race. It sounded like it wasn't going to be beating in a foot race. So she was like, so I'm just going to juke her out. And it still worked.
Mm.
I was just watching them and I was like, they're not
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me, but you're right.
And I was like, this is interesting. And it was the only thing kind of watching the entire match that I was like, that's a downside, I think. The rest of their team is quite quick. Like they've got fast forwards,
Yeah.
they've got
Which is the trick.
fast centers, everything like that. And I think because their forwards generally are a bit smaller, I think that's
Mhm.
why they are that little bit quicker. But their
For sure.
wingers just weren't that.
They do everything quick though. Like I feel like their passing is quick. Like they've got
Everything is quick. I
But
really
they were
wish we
not
did
fast
have these
runners.
stats because they would have been really good to look at, including like especially the line speed, especially pass speed, especially actually now I think about it, they kicked a decent amount. I wouldn't say
Well, I don't know because there aren't any stats.
exactly.
I feel like
I'd
they
love to know though.
And also, there's only like teeny tiny amounts of video available because the camera kept cutting out. And then there was like one point where the sprinkler system turned on. So they had to abandon the game for like 10 minutes. So
yeah, the whole thing was a
Fantastic.
bit car crash, really.
It was a
and it
bit
did look like it was filmed on a toaster.
it was all a bit warm up.
And I'm going to complain about it bitterly because it was on Rugby Pass. And if anybody should do better, it's the company that's owned by
You're
World Rugby.
absolutely right.
Like usually their stuff's really good. The whole it was quite frustrating.
This
and it cut
was
out like at 70
dire.
minutes. When the game was poised, there's like 2 minutes left,
Yeah.
and it's like, hello. Yeah.
So from there, we have another match to discuss that I feel like there was a bit of an improvement by USA, which is awesome. USA played Canada over this weekend, opening the Pacific Four. Again, a reminder that score ended up 14-26. And I will just remind folks who may be new or never followed American and Canadian rugby. The last time that we had this match, I don't have the exact score in front of me, and now I realize I should have. But it was closer to a 50-point difference. So this is a huge improvement for America, especially week over week, and a shorter turnaround because it was Friday night and they had just played the previous Saturday. I'm gonna open it up to you guys first because I want to collect my thoughts and see what you noticed, because I have a lot of thoughts, but I think most of them are probably obvious.
I absolutely loved this match. I loved
It was
it.
a great match.
It was oh my God. It was a bit of a breath of fresh air for me. Sorry, I enjoyed it more than most of the Six Nations matches. I'm sorry.
That was really what I wanted to tell the listeners, though, is that especially if you did find the Six Nations a little bit cloying, like we did at one point, where we were just like, God, is this not over? This didn't feel like that.
I just loved it from the start. It was just, I don't know. I think Canada and USA have got
box office
similar styles of play.
Exactly, and it's not a style that you see at the Six Nations.
Exactly, and I do think USA was so up for it. Like every tackle, they were like going in for each.
I think they took the Japan loss hard, which you need to do with this USA team.
I agree.
I'm fine with when they feel bad, because when they feel bad, they hit back. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And Canada are a good side. They refused to kind of
Fantastic.
lie down to it. They really stood up to them. Every lock on, every scrum, everything that USA won, it was just like, yeah,
It was high energy. It was high energy. That's what I was going to say, is that
but to be fair,
they were there for a show.
Canada doing the same back as well. I saw Canada doing the same in the second half.
They both teams always cite the other one. Like, even if you offered them everybody, even if you said, like, if you wanted, you could play the Black Ferns every time, I think a lot of them would just pick each other.
I loved it so much. And Alev, I love watching Alev because I honestly
and this was, I think, one of her best international performances that I've ever seen out of her.
And she played most of that match with some sort of a neck problem. Like, she kept going down,
didn't she? I think
like 2 or 3 times she kept going down, and she kept kind of touching her neck, and
it was not good. And they kept being like, "No, stay down." And she was like, "I mean,
no,
if you've ever seen it, if you've ever seen Alev, you know that, like, it's very hard to make her." Loughborough, the SNC has talked about it before. They're like, it's really hard to make her, like, stop.
Yeah, and
so people just don't have a stop.
Kay Treads, who is her fiance and plays hooker for the USA, came over as if to be like, you should go off.
I think it's time to go off. And she was like, no, it's good. And then, like, what are you going to do? Have an argument with your wife? Right? No.
She just got back up and carried on playing. And then
carried on playing ridiculously high level.
I was going to say, which unfortunately we ended up really needing to rely on. It the one thing that I did feel a little bit bad, just like empathetically, it was just like, if you guys could have maybe, like, come help her a little bit. Like, unfortunately, like, there wasn't a ton around her to help take the load off, but
she was just incredible. And then, like, 5 minutes after she went down again with the neck injury, all of a sudden she had this incredible intercept and just legged it down.
It was just nuts. It was just nuts. I was hoping that she would, like, make it through, and then she was like, no.
No. I'm going to score something incredible.
And it was something like 65 meters. It was insane.
65 meters at 65 minutes.
Yeah.
She's so deceptive. Like, she doesn't, when she's running,
reading the game off the charts.
Like, I don't understand how she does it. Like,
her game vision is like, and if she weren't on my team, it would really frustrate me. Because, like, how come you can do that in 7s and 15s, and, like, most people can't even do it in one or the other? Like, and most people don't have that vision.
And then you also realize that she also represented the USA in ice hockey and captained.
And by the way,
the under 18 side.
I was going to say, the only reason, and again, I'm hoping for the folks that I'm introducing to American rugby, the only reason that we get to have Alev Kelter at all, and that we are seeing this generational talent, is because she didn't get selected for Sochi by America. She said she was like, I was so mad. I was like, I have to get away from hockey for a bit. Like, it's doing my head in. I like this anyway. Let's go for it.
She was. Yeah, people don't know, she was a dual sport athlete, so she played soccer and ice hockey in Wisconsin, I think.
At Wisconsin, which is one of the best ice hockey schools in the country.
It's like the program that's won the most
and pumps out PWHL players every year. Yeah.
Put her in any sport, she'd probably be looking at it. She's just an incredible.
There are some people who are just, like, born athletes.
And I think
and she's an identical twin.
And an identical twin.
Nice as well. I just love her. We just love her.
Also lovely, yeah. And then also, like, the only Turkish Alaskan that I know, which is cool. I think that's where all their first names come from. I think
she's also a Boston Bruins fan, which I am going to judge her for. But
what can you do? What can you do?
Everyone's perfect.
I know, exactly, because what if? And then you'd be mad at Catherine Treader, and then we would be in a fight
with her.
All right.
I do think Canada, just to talk about Canada for a bit,
please.
I know USA looked rusty in the Japan game. I think Canada looked rusty. You could tell they hadn't had a warm-up game. At times they
expressed that after too. They said that they were frustrated just because it felt like they had to knock a lot of rust off.
At times their offloads were really good. They were really effective. I thought I'm a bit of a flanker fan. What's her name? Pacan, is it? I thought Pacan.
Karen Pacan. I mean,
is been, like, away from rugby for a while.
Yes,
been away from rugby for 21 months.
I thought it was 20 or something like that, but yeah, or 2020 or something, was it?
Yeah, so she hasn't played international rugby since the last World Cup, but she's been she played a bit domestically in Canada, but she hasn't played in, like, almost 2 years.
Right. And the last, oh, there we go. Sorry. That's what it was. And the last time she had it was when she was still playing in Elite One, which hadn't been for her for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So 2 years at least. Pecan had a great game. Julia Schell had a great game as usual.
Brilliant.
Amazing off the tee. Yeah, had some really great kicks. We saw I learned that one of their new caps, the oh God, what was the four's name? The new lock.
Smith.
Smith. There we go.
She has the most generic, no offense to her if she's
It's like
listening, the most
Kate
generic
Smith or
name of all
something.
time.
Yeah, it was something that was why I couldn't remember it. I was just like Jones because I have Wales brain. No, not that she had an amazing game. She had a fine game. But I did learn that she is yet another kicking forward for Canada. So now we have Sophie DeGoody, Emma Taylor, this one. And I also
like Tyson's kicked before.
Tyson can kick, and Pacan can kick in a pinch.
Of course she can.
Of course she can.
Do anything. I thought the scrum half played well. Is it Justine Pelletier?
Pelletier, who has been at.
She looks really good. You know me, I'm
wankers. Yeah, she's either at Bordeaux or Montpellier. But either way, she is constantly topping teams of the week in Elite One. Honestly, I think the only reason that she's not bigger is because she hates speaking in English. I really think she would be up there, like charismatic more. But I just love her.
I thought she was awesome, really, really good. So yeah, I think
Tessier had a great game. The Quebecers always.
Tessier, the way she talks to the referee all the time. Honestly,
I love it. I love it.
No, I loved it. But both.
Oh yeah.
Her and you're watching USA versus Canada, and both captains you've got like
are so good.
It's like
it's true. And by the way, not for nothing, but like and you know, I hate it when people put spotlight on people who aren't even around. So I'll try not to do it either. But like it's hard to not to mention that like Sophie DeGoody isn't in right now. It would be enough for anybody if it was just like you have her. When she's back, you'll have her. But they're like, no, we've still got somebody good enough.
The way that she's talking.
Yeah, great communication.
There's no like questioning. There wasn't any kind of like. I think it was when they had a yellow card, didn't they? I think, and she was just fine. But like, it was just. I don't know. I just think.
Just want it explained. Let's go.
Both captains were textbook. If you're a young player and you want a captain, it's textbook. You watch these two.
Absolutely.
It was, that
was really refreshing.
I really enjoyed that game. As you can tell, I'm quite excited about that game.
Yeah, definitely catch that one as well. Or on replay, sorry, on Rugby Pass TV if it is working for you at the time, but it is very much worth the replay. And I mean, this isn't a pod that fucking cares about any of this, but we'll say it anyway. It was super cool. It did break the record for USA women in America. Playing in America, 10,500 people at CPKC, which was the first purpose-built women's sport facility in America. So all of that is very cool. Great job, America. I am really stoked to find out that the projection is that the match that I will be reporting from live here in DC in July is projected right now to meet or break that, which I'm stoked about. Really good sign for American rugby. I can't wait to see how we go now that the Ottawa match has been announced for Canada. I'm really hoping that they have some great luck with that as well. I wish we could have had the American match up there, but maybe they'll figure something out. But moving along. Oh, sorry.
Importantly, Hope Rogers.
Oh yes.
Equaled and then broke a very important record. And became the most capped eagle. Is it just female eagle or eagle?
Female eagle.
Female eagle of all time. I think it's like 52 caps.
Yeah, 51 was the record, 52 broke it. So and what is even more touching is that she took the record from her predecessor, which was Jamie Burke, who plays the same position. And it was quite touching. Hope learned under her. Hope was playing back in the 2014 World Cup. Really lovely to see. And of course, I'm a huge Jamie Burke fan myself, as she is from UVA and from here in my home state of Virginia. So all of that was fantastic. We will talk about it.
USA rugby socials are absolutely killing it at the moment.
Yeah, really killing it. They are. A lot of other nations could take it out, but what in particular?
honestly, I've seen some amazing reels in just the last week, but for the last couple of weeks, they've been really good. And there was not just like Kate Zachary leading on some really awesome stuff about diversity, but there was a really good, I have to mention this because I loved it so much. This was for the Sevens, but because the Sevens USA team are doing really well, and they had Anne McCain talk to the
That's right.
squad from space. And I'm
Doesn't it? I mean, like, I don't even know what to say. Like, I'm sorry, all your programs don't have a former team member astronaut, but we do.
You know how much I love Anne McCain. She's a
I
rugby
know.
player and she's an astronaut.
An astronaut. And I'm just saying, who else has it?
That's
I don't think the Black Ferns have one.
No.
That's the only thing we have.
I think the only country that potentially has that is Russia, and they're not allowed to play at the moment.
And they're not allowed to play anymore.
Canada might have one or two.
Oh, that's true. Actually, we should look into that. Sophie DeGoody probably has one of those too in her family.
Yeah, she'll probably.
I just wanted to call that out because stuff
it is so cool.
It is really cool, but it also does make a difference, and yeah, it's all really cool.
It does, and I feel like they are definitely capitalizing on momentum that we are seeing globally. And there's so much free momentum, and it's really frustrating when teams aren't using it. And I feel like, for example, Six Nations really didn't. I feel like it wasn't capitalizing at all on
it was rubbish.
The massive energy there was for it.
Really
I miss the TikTok Six Nations.
I miss
the TikTok Six Nations. Which
I just
we're gonna get canceled for as well.
Genuinely find the USA reels really inspirational, and I'm not just saying that because I do like USA, but like, you know, just
but it means a lot, and there are still like it feels cynical. It feels cynical to be making socials content that feels kind of like the teams are assuming that they don't have younger fans or that they don't have like girls coming up. Why is none of your shit inspirational? I understand that it's hokey, not everybody is going to love it, but that is a hallmark of North American rugby that I see as like a stark difference from European rugby, especially, is that like the willingness to risk being cheesy, to risk being like, yes, maybe this doesn't appeal to you, 45-year-old man who's been watching rugby his whole life. Sometimes things aren't for you.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes in European rugby, especially, there's a real want to appeal to absolutely everybody who could be a rugby fan, and then you miss most of them.
Yeah.
Because shit's not inspiring. Yep. So with that in mind, we opened the floor to questions. The questions that we ended up getting are from our dear friends in the Rap Pod family, but we will bang through those. So the first question that we got, friend of the pod, other fellow host of other pods, Hugh Griffin, wanted to know, will South Africa join Pacific 4? The answer to that is pretty short because South Africa doesn't touch the Pacific Ocean, so probably not, but I understand where you were going with it. He is a math boy. He is not a geography boy. I understand where you're going with it, and there is a little bit of room to discuss. A lot of it is hypothetical, and we can just touch briefly on, especially now that we've extolled the virtues of Japan playing rugby. If it were to expand, the most obvious expansion would be to Pacific 6, and it would be adding Fiji and Japan. Obviously, especially those two countries don't have a ton. Japan does now, but Fiji definitely doesn't have a ton of cash. It would be a huge boon to that team to get more international exposure, because right now, like many other, and Fiji shouldn't be developing for women, but it is a developing team.
Match the Pacific Nations Cup, which is
exactly
just a little bit better. It wouldn't match exactly because obviously Australia and New Zealand don't play in the Pacific Nations Cup. They've got two other
they've got them
in there, but it would match up a little bit better, which is always nice. And I think 6 is a rounder number. I would
expand it, and it's fun. Oh, sorry.
My only concern there maybe is if you take Fiji out of the Oceania Championship.
Oh, that's true. I didn't think of that. You're right.
Is that it does you kind of destroy it, because you basically just leave Tonga in it, and then you've got, I think it's Papua New Guinea and Samoa, and then that championship kind of falls apart. Like, it's already a very struggling championship. I definitely think Japan should be in it, and I know you did say like South Africa doesn't touch the Pacific Ocean, so I do see your point there. But does it get renamed?
That's true. That's true. I should be less tongue in cheek because it does make a lot of sense, to be honest. It does make a lot of sense. I do have one counter offer to that, though, is that South Africa is, I think, ideally located to do one of two things. Obviously, that is one of them, but you could also come over to South America and you could really bolster, say, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, and South Africa. They faced each other before, especially in Rugby World Cup playoffs for positions. Everybody who travels to South Africa for women's rugby says that they love it as a tour. Brazil most recently did. They loved it. The money would be a problem.
I also think South Africa deserve to play higher levels of rugby more
That's true.
often.
And so that's
I think that's
more, that's
and
fair.
I think one of the problems, especially like in Pacific 4 at the minute, you've got New Zealand and Canada who are quite far ahead. Australia are,
rapidly ascending,
going like this. USA are kind of doing this. Yeah. You do kind of need two more teams in that competition to make it work. Like, it's a bit too short of a competition. It's a bit, the teams don't maybe get as much of a shot. Like, they don't get as many tests. I feel like Japan and South Africa would be the better countries in it.
It would, to be fair. It would, to be fair, for actually, that's a really good, that's a really good point.
You could have them go to South Africa.
Right, you can have them go to South Africa. That was what I was going to say. I was going to say my one major complaint is that I don't really know. Yes, the time zones. I don't really know why it's the case. I mean, I do and I don't know why it's the case that it feels like more Pacific 4 matches are in Oceania than they are here.
They're supposed to swap every year.
You're supposed to, but for some reason, Pacific 4, I'm always having to watch it like 1 or 2 in the morning. So I'm not sure what the deal is there. But also, like, there is a broader conversation you can have, which is like, in women's rugby, I feel like travel to Australia and New Zealand is way overrepresented. Like, everybody does it. Most teams don't come to America or Canada. Most teams don't come to Wales. Most teams don't tour France. Those are the ones. Everybody has a fucking tour in New Zealand. I understand it's gorgeous. I would want to too. It's one of the homes of rugby on the planet. Beautiful country, lots and lots of easy to travel around. I understand all the benefits, but if you are committed to really growing the game, has to go other places.
I'm gonna say something controversial here.
Oh, on this podcast?
They don't really get huge crowds.
Also, they don't get huge crowds.
Who don't?
And
New Zealand.
No, they
that was the whole argument about 2021.
So, like, they got a huge crowd for the final in 2021, and then when they had WXV1 the following year, the crowds were
really bad.
Really bad, yeah.
And then
South Africa was getting better crowds for WXV2.
Yeah, and then
was the really bad contrast that made them embarrassed.
And then when they've had matches since, so Australia, New Zealand, they play additional matches outside of Pac 4. And again, those games, not that well attended.
No.
Their club matches, not particularly well attended. And even their men's matches,
picky.
Apart from the men's internationals, not well attended. Like, I don't really get the...
Well, in Australia, rugby is not doing.
I was just going to say, well, it's not necessarily a conversation for us to have, simply because I don't think any of the three of us follow it this closely. We have good friend of all of us, Alice Soper. If you are curious more about the problems that they are facing both in New Zealand and to a wider extent Australia and New Zealand, now that they are playing more and more together because of this problem, that in those two nations, in some ways, rugby union is at risk. Rugby union specifically is at risk. There is heavy competition from rugby league. That's not something that anybody on this podcast has a lot of experience with, follows very closely, but it is something that is hemorrhaging players in those two countries. There are real problems happening, especially with women and especially in Australia, of NRLW coming and poaching people Huge names are now going to league. I think it's probably part of what we're seeing about why they can't get big crowds for this. I don't think that it's just that there's no demand for women's sports. That's not true.
Also, their kind of advertising of matches is poor.
Also poor.
And that is talked about at length.
Is something they talk about at length. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, the end of our conclusion is yes to Japan, and we're out on whether it should be South Africa or Fiji.
Yes, South Africa or Fiji. Fiji, my problem is that
there's just downsides to it. I think it would kill the Oceania competition.
It would absolutely. I didn't even think of that, and I feel really bad for not doing so because it's a common pitfall, but it's one I should be better than. But you're absolutely right. It would decimate that competition, and there is merit. There's a lot of merit to tier 2 international competitions.
Has competitive matches in that competition.
Yes.
Whereas
that's true.
South Africa does not have competitive matches at the moment.
No. And well, so interestingly, I mean, if we were to go down that road, it's going to cause too much more conversation around it. But you could also make the same argument that it would ruin the Rugby Africa Cup. But I don't think so because of how quickly, for example, Kenya, Uganda, to a lesser extent, Cote d'Ivoire, Tunisia are building up.
I think there's more countries there and it's a lot more equal. Whereas the Oceania Championship is very volatile.
Yes. And the only reason that I bring all of that up is because while it's true that there are continentally more people in the Rugby Africa Cup who will very likely grow and get better, the hard downside is that of all of the teams that we are talking about, any team other than South Africa on the continent of Africa has way fewer funds, way less ability to travel, all sorts of socio-political things that we don't even consider about who can travel where. So that said, you're right. I think it might be less disruptive to pull South Africa from their competitions than Fiji. You're right. Good question, Hugh. Thank you. Your second question for us was, has this Women's Six Nations that just passed proven that you don't have to have your players in PWR for your national team to compete? Absolutely. I think that that's not a question anymore. None of the French play in it and hasn't had a huge impact on them.
One player who's played at Ealing before.
Oh, yeah, Riffino. Good call.
But more importantly, it's proved that if you do have players in the PWR, it doesn't mean anything because most of Wales play in the PWR and we were shit. So
and we were shit, and we had our own coach.
Yeah,
I feel like it really kind of more than spoke to whether you need to have your players in the PWR. I think it really spoke more to, well, PWR actually kind of needs the internationals. When you count who is where, it's not that there are these huge pockets that are like, I understand RFU would love to continue the narrative that like, we're training your players for you. Okay. Celtic Challenge has honestly taken a load off your shoulders. Yes, it has. I understand that there is no England of the Celtic Challenge. That's good, by the way. Great. It's a competitive competition. I would love to see what happens with WER. I would love to see, because it disrupts people's lives so much. I think PWR got lucky that Trump got elected because I now think that there will be a delay for Canadians to come in and play. I think that's the only thing holding them back. I know that everybody finds it a huge, huge drain on a lot of facets of their life to pick up and move to England. I'm sorry, it's not Australia or New Zealand. It's like a fun place to move. Nobody wants to move to Manchester, but it's where you go to play.
Nobody wants to live in Loughborough.
Nobody wants. I'm sorry, but they don't. No, I mean, I hate to have to live in
Leicester.
Well, I hate to have to use this story because of all my other issues with it, and I don't need bullshit from people. But when Bristol was trying to convince Ilona Maher to come, they just lied to her and said that Bristol was 40 minutes by train from London. That was the only reason that she came. Or I know that was the joke. They were asking, they had, it was when Dave Ward was on commentary for the final, I guess. Yeah, when he was on for the final, they were like, how did that conversation go? And it's also why she wasn't in training so much, because she had to go for her brand stuff. But like it is true that anybody who has the choice would go to London or nowhere. So really,
well, I
for
mean,
me,
you would, but unless you were a Welsh player who wanted to stay closer to Wales, and obviously Bristol
sure,
were perfect.
it's Bristol, but also but that's the case. Most
Exactly.
of Wales is in Gloucester or Bristol.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Unless
because
you're
they
from
would
North
rather be
Wales, in
playing.
which case you'd go to Manchester. And you'd
Yeah,
be,
and they go to
yeah.
Sale, which they have. It's true.
I think this is more about having your players available more.
I think the thing we've learned is about
Rather than
having your
being-
players playing domestically. If you look at the top 3 teams,
Most of their players play
most of their
domestically.
players play domestically, and it means you have access to your players. You can bring them in, like England were having their players come into camp a lot earlier. Ireland had all of their players in camp. France had their players in
France
camp.
never has a problem with camp.
Yeah.
And
So
like
I think,
and by the way,
that's what we've learned more. I feel like the PWR is great.
Oh, it's
Sure.
it's a great tournament. It's a great
it's
competition.
It's great. Well,
We
you
were
know
left
what?
with our players only coming in 4 days before.
I will say it if it's more complicated for people based in the UK to say, like, it's a great option for now. I don't think it's going to stay that way forever. If you look at who's going where,
I think development
also
with the developments that are happening, I think it's going to change.
Absolutely, and I think that that's good, by the way. Honestly, I think that PWR is bolstered a bit right now. That until recently, like it is still. So there are 2 really, really, really good high quality leagues that people would want to play in and can't. And it's Elite 1 because for Elite 1 you have to have French or they won't let you. I mean, I think you can. I think when Rona Lloyd first started in Elite 1, like 4 or 5 years ago, she didn't speak that great French. Her French is completely fluent now. Helen Nelson speaks French. Rachel McLaughlin is very quickly learning French. That is a barrier to entry for Elite 1. And for Opiki, I think that it's just extremely hard if you're not a New Zealander to play it. In fact, I can't think of any internationals playing in Opiki.
There's a Canadian playing.
But is it a Canadian who is playing for the national team, or is she just happened to be Canadian? Because that might just be.
Team.
Oh, okay. Well, great. I mean, that's fantastic. I will say that we now have 3 Americans versus the 1 American that we had in Super W now. I mean, right now we only have former or fringe players playing in Elite 1, but I could see that change. Learning French isn't that hard anymore. I mean, honestly, even South Africa, it's not the time right now, and it's not probably the time in the next few years, but knowing how fast they are developing and what they have done with their pro league already, I could see that, especially with how much everybody likes going there. I could see that being a place people go to play. I think it's only a matter of time until WER becomes an attractive place to play. I think PWR has coasted. Good on them. But I think
it's feasted off other countries not having a proper.
Yes, I think exactly. I think they underestimate in their hubris. I think they underestimate how much what it does to your life to have to go play there. I understand that for a long time it was just like, well, yeah, that's the game. If you want to play at a high level, this is where you do it. Okay. But especially for the Americans, and I can speak very knowledgeably for them, like your entire life is shaken up. And a lot of these girls are going to have to take full-time jobs, probably much longer into older age than they would have because they couldn't save money. Most of them are breaking even. They all live like 7 to a house. This is not, this is something that you do out of passion, not because it's the best. And you could see by how many people came back that they would much rather be at home.
I think the PWR, you said, like they've coasted, they haven't developed. Like you can see, apart from Elite 1, who are really struggling with streaming and how to make that work, every other major league is better at streaming their games.
Don't get me started.
Just like WER's been going for 7 weeks and they've managed to not be able to stream 1 game.
Nice.
Yep.
Celtic Challenge has streamed every single game since their relaunch in the 2nd year.
Yep. To great success, honestly. I mean, the streams aren't the best, but they're consistent.
Yeah. You've got leagues now who are changing the way that they pay players. So Toulouse have kind of changed the way that they pay people.
Which means the rest
WER
are to
seem
follow.
to have got kind of, they say that they're professional, they're more semi-professional, but they're working on it. They're trying to gain capital so that eventually everyone is professional.
And notably, WER does one thing very differently, and I think that it was very much on purpose. And because most of the players who are giving input have played places like Elite One or PWR, most notably, there isn't the kind of bullshit that PWR has where some people are making like $2,000 a year and some people are making just enough to live. WER said straight off the bat, they're like, everybody is going to get a livable wage. Livable is flexible. It's different in the Twin Cities to like Northern California. They're hoping for expansion. That will be even more different. But that said, it was something on their mind from jump that like this needs to be something that somebody consider their job. PWR has always looked at it as like, you're welcome for what you get.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work anymore.
And I think that's where the PWR really needs to
modernize.
Yeah. Because at the minute they're like, oh, you're lucky if you get paid.
Yes.
Whereas
because a lot of people genuinely don't. And the whole idea is because we expect you to live at home.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking a lot of like the Welsh and the Scottish that like the 18 and 19-year-olds don't get paid at all. And they're like, we assume. And by the way, that's a barrier to entry that makes sure that you only get PAL shows, which they complain about. If you want to fix it, that's how. So, Hugh had one more set of questions for us. We came together, we took a vote because this is Democratic podcast. Hugh also wanted to know, what do we think we're doing? And the answer is a good podcast. And he wanted to know, what gives us the right? And the answer is it's legal when girls do it.
I will say, if I was a dictator, I would make it the law that men had to take some sort of exam before they were able to buy podcasting equipment.
That's right.
But not women.
That's right.
Or
general empathy. People. General empathy, you have to make sure not a sociopath.
Yeah, you don't listen
can't
to
can't be about crypto.
Yeah.
Don't listen to any of the stuff that auto plays on YouTube. No.
No. Regular's not allowed. So do you listen
and then she kind of gets dictatory, and then she starts saying like which teams she thinks shouldn't have podcasts, and then it goes off the rails, and then she gets us canceled.
But it's fine because we're all women, so it's fine.
It's
non-binary folks also fine.
Non-binary folks also fine, unless you have bad opinions. You're case by case. All right, moving along. Other friend of the pod, also a rap host, our friend Harley Worth, has some good questions for us. The first question is, after the first round of Pac 4, how do the two comps compare? And he means Six Nations and Pacific 4. We've talked a bit about that as we've discussed, but we can definitely give like a concise, our view of the comparison between the two. I am happy to go first. Well, first of all, we've only seen one match, but we've seen them other years. For me, the way that they compare is especially in play style. All four teams play completely differently than you'll see in Europe. For me, and over the past few years, they've been more competitive. There have been huge upsets in the Pacific 4. The Pacific 4 is where Canada recently beat New Zealand, which is huge. America beat Australia for the first time in Pacific 4 as well. Those are all really fun. I will be honest with you, I am bored way less when I watch Pacific 4 than Six Nations, and that is for mostly Six Nations stuff, not because any rugby is better than any other rugby, but if you like upsets, if a little bit of unpredictability, if you like watching things at 3 a.m, if you have insomnia, you'll love Pacific 4, depending on where you live. Go on. Everybody else. Sorry.
I don't know if I feel like maybe I've got Six Nations fatigue, particularly from being
also a bit jaded.
I'm quite jaded with the Six Nations. So to me, it's, I don't know, I find the matches in the Pac 4 a little bit more exciting. I just get like the USA Canada game. I was like quite like, oh, it's that.
You're on your edge of the seat.
Yeah.
More matches should be like that England France game. But
yeah, exactly.
Six Nations, you very rarely get them.
At the moment, the last few years, I haven't really found the Six Nations very exciting. It's just underwhelming to me. Yeah.
Hattie?
It's definitely a fun competition. Do you know what? I don't really want to get into the like the Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, because there is an aspect of that where you're like, obviously Australia and New Zealand do play that like more
very fast,
like
You're 100% right to mention that, because there's always that, you always get that in the men's as well. It's like, it's just,
And it feels
different.
cop-outy.
Yeah, and I don't want to say like that's why it's better, because that's not the reason, because
Right.
USA and Canada
And
also
also
play a
we're not
completely
trying
different
to say
style
one
as
is
well.
I don't think
Exactly.
it's necessarily being better. I think for me, genuinely, I think I've got Six Nations fatigue.
It's no, and that was really what I wanted to stress with mine as well, is that I don't view one as better than the other, but it gives you a variety.
Yeah, and you've got the USA and Canada who play similar styles.
Yes.
Which is like this bizarre North American.
I love it. It's the rugby I grew up with,
can kick, and
I love it.
I really like it. We've talked about it.
all 12s who also have the
Yeah.
best hands of all time, and they're going to switch to 13 halfway through the game, and she's also going to be like the fastest person you've ever seen in your life.
Also, she's really strong, which isn't fair. You can't be really fast and really strong. Be one or the other.
Yeah.
It's rugby.
And then you've got Australia and New Zealand who act very much like their men's teams.
Very, very similarly aligned.
Yeah, very similar. So it is a really weird clash of styles, especially when you get the weekend where you have Canada playing New Zealand and Australia playing
Australia.
USA, because
that's the best weekend for me. That's my favorite weekend.
Very even, in terms of like USA,
and very unpredictable.
Yeah, like USA and Australia, very kind of similar levels in the last couple of years, and then Canada and New Zealand, very similar levels the last couple of years. But it's this clash of styles, and it really does feel like whoever is better on that day is better on that day, but it could be completely different the next day. And
so what makes it fun.
Yeah, it's great. The only problem is that the matches, whether they are being held in North America or down under, are horrendous timings, but they're usually on Rugby Pass. So
yeah, you can just watch on catch up, can't you?
Yeah.
All right, so we are also asked by our friend Harley, our favorite question, so I saved it for last. If you were a young up-and-coming player of all the leagues, and the leagues that we're going to be considering are the ones that we've been talking about, so PWR, Elite One, OPICI, Super W, WER, which team or competition? He asked team. Team is really hard for me, so I expanded it to competition. Which competition would you be most excited to play in? Do either of you have an immediate answer? Because mine is kind of muddled.
Mine's really muddled, because I feel like it depends on where I'm from, I think.
Exactly.
Like
that's the thing, is that if I'm Julia, the career front rower, and I'm imagining me when I was good, then I have an answer. But also, like, if I were a young girl now, depending on where I were from, because my answer when I was playing would have been like, obviously I want to go play in the PWR. But now, if I were still an American and I had, this developmental pathway, I would want to stay in the WER. I am excited by it. Hattie touched on it, and I'm really glad you did. It's not something I need to go that much into because it would just completely veer off. But it is true, North American rugby is genuinely different than any other style of rugby. I understand that for the longest time, because we were kind of always the whipping boy that, they're new, they don't know anything about rugby, they all think that it's football, whatever. None of that is true, but as we've talked about throughout actually this episode, what I really like about North American rugby is that we are not two traditional rugby nations. So what you see is a bunch of athletes who played soccer, and that is why you see kicking forwards. A lot of players played ice hockey. Ice hockey is incredibly popular in both America and Canada. The physical skills that you have, the tenacity, the recovery are very similar actually across the sports. But you end up seeing this style that a lot of people aren't that familiar with. And I understand that traditionally that was where people made fun of us the most, took us least seriously. Thanks, a huge amount of thanks to Canada for becoming as good as you have, because people have finally gone like, all right, there might be merit to this. People are confounded by Sophie DeGoody or Emma Taylor. What do you do with that? So I would be excited with that. Obviously, if I were coming up and I had the opportunity and the world wasn't a hellscape, like, yeah, of course I'd like to go and play in OPICI. Like, I want to go fucking play with Portia Woodman Whitcliffe, absolutely. But my answer would be WAR. How about you guys?
Well, I think if I was playing now in Wales, it would probably want to go to the PWR, I think. But yeah,
Yeah, for an easiest life.
into go and play in New Zealand. Like that would
Right.
be awesome. Or even WER, seriously.
Yeah,
Like like for
I
in terms
really
of
love.
the levels, if say I was like amazing and I like had the
Yeah.
aspiration to be PWR and New Zealand right now, but like not France because I can't speak French. But like I do think that WER can be at that level. So like I would be tempted if it years and it was like getting up to that level, I'd be attracted to
because
that.
because that's the thing is like, what if you were like, you know, I'm trying to think of like what if you were like Sarah McKenna and you got in at the ground level and then like by the time it was really good, like you were one of the guys.
Yeah.
You could be in a really great spot. And I do think some youth are really seeing that. We already saw just over these past 2 USA matches, we have WER players in WER who are getting their caps, and they were found because of their amazing performances.
But that's also not to say that I don't think that the Celtic Challenge can also develop.
I think so too.
And if the Celtic Challenge,
if they could make it professional,
they can make it properly professional. Honestly, I can see
I would pick that
potential there in just the last year from how much it's been improved from the year before. If I
were Welsh and Celtic Challenge were professional, that would be my answer. Easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Done. I want to play at home.
Yeah, exactly. So if that was, I mean, depends on how much, wanderlust you have as well. But like, yeah, if you wanted to, if the Celtic Challenge can develop where I think it can get as well, sure, I'd want to play in the Celtic Challenge.
I think with the PWR, it's hit a kind of stalemate. We talked about it a little bit, but it's hit this stalemate where the RFU don't seem to want to expand it much. And they're like, this is the formula, this is how much people
They
get
like how
paid.
it works.
But there's no like desire to overhaul it. So there is huge inequality in the amount that people get paid. There is the streaming of it and the
it's hard.
Is absolutely ridiculous. And so if I was a player, especially if I wasn't English, if you're English and you're playing in the PWR and you want to play internationally, well, you've gone through the under 18s pathway, you've gone through the under 20s pathway, and then you've got coaches going around. If you're coming from another nation and you want to get picked up by another country, it's going to be really hard because your games aren't necessarily on TV.
Yep.
So how are you going to get seen? And you're getting paid pennies if you're getting paid. You're lucky if you're getting petrol money for a lot of these kids. I think Elite One has a lot of the same problems.
Yep.
And I think with Elite One, we're not going to see those changes until there is kind of this rumored takeover that may or may not happen. For me, with both in Australia and New Zealand, I personally wouldn't go for either of them. Although they are paid and they are broadcast, I don't think the season's long enough. I think that's a big downside to both of those. But I think as leagues at the moment, the Celtic Challenge and WER have, and we sound kind of biased because we're a Welsh rugby podcast with 2 Welsh people and an American, but they have the most potential growth. Both of them have from the outset, we're going to broadcast every game. WER is going, okay, we're going to pay you all blanket amounts. Yes, it's slightly different depending what city you're in, but it's a blanket amount. We're not going to pay you more just because you've got a better name or whatever. Yeah, WER has a lot of growing room. And then the Celtic Challenge, I think, yeah, if the contracts go back to the clubs, and I think we'll see a lot next year when it's 2 clubs taking over rather than WER running it centrally, we'll see some differences.
I think it's a really interesting point you mentioned that because it feels like the PWR aren't really thinking about the future much.
No.
Whereas the Celtic Challenge is very much like, this is the start of our journey and we kind of want to kind of develop. Whereas the PWR, I feel, are just like, oh, we got this great thing. We can just sit back now.
Oh, they're like, oh no, they're like, this is the women's game.
Heading on to concluding business, I've got just a few. First of all, over the weekend, Australia defeated Fiji in a warm-up match in Suva, 43-7. Unfortunately, we haven't been able, we did find stats for it, which is awesome. We were unable to find any good footage, so we didn't feel like we could talk authoritatively about it. But that one was a little bit exciting. If you're a big women's rugby head, you will have noticed that this was the first clash between two notable coaches, Joe Yap for Australia and Yon Cunningham for Fiji. We're hoping to see, I mean, whatever, we have our own feelings as Welsh fans. It might be the case that maybe they're really liking him. We don't know. I really wish we could have seen the performance. That's about in line with generally how the point differentials are between these two teams. We've talked a bit about Fiji's development, so not a super shocking result. Hoping to find a little bit more about that. Coming up for Pack 4, the next match will be Australia versus New Zealand. It's going to be on Saturday, May 10th in New Zealand. I am not sure about what time it'll be 1 a.m. for me. So that means it'll be 6 a.m. for you guys, I believe. But check socials. I'm really not positive. I have that in my notes. I'm really not positive. In WER, we have one more match tonight. Never mind. You're not going to be. Just gonna skip that.
We're going to watch it in 2 minutes.
We're gonna watch it in 2 minutes. That's why we're leaving. Next week for WER, we have TC Gemini, Twin Cities Gemini facing Denver Onyx on Friday the 9th at 7 p.m. Central Time. That is unfortunately also 1 a.m. UK time. And on Saturday, May 10th, we have the Bay Breakers facing the Boston Banshees. That's going to be at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. UK time. As a reminder, all of those will be available for live streaming and replay on DAZN. D-A-Z-N, DAZN. Not DAZN. They have threatened me with legal action if I keep saying DAZN.
I really wish it was DAZN because DAZN is horrendous. It
should be DAZN, and for me, it's going to continue to be so much so that my long-suffering wife says that every time she sees the app on the TV when she's scrolling for a better app that has more interesting things for her, she said that now when she sees it, she does hear in my head me going, DAZN. Can you imagine being married to me? Sounds exhausting.
In the UK, Daz is a washing powder, so
yeah, that's what I think of.
Always what I think.
Oh, see, that's fantastic.
You think of that, but then you open it and it's just full of like half-naked
boxing.
Men.
Yeah, a boxing. And so what's really weird is that what they have for women is they've got like Frauenbundesliga, awesome. They do also sometimes have WSL, so it's like gay women, just a bunch of
basket.
So gay women, just
who
are tall. It's a bunch of tall, athletic women. One of them, they're all blonde. One of them, they're all more interesting.
Before.
What?
Didn't tell me this before.
Oh, yes, you can watch WSL on DAZN. You can go look at it. You can go look at it during the weird technical difficulties that WER has. This is a really poor way.
Like professional corn.
Yeah. They also have some weird sports. They have like professional cornhole. I think
they have lacrosse on there.
They do have lacrosse. I think they also have the slap fighting one, the professional slap league.
I did notice the other day they have like rodeo, but you have to pay for it.
Yeah, you got to get the premium for you can see for DAZN, you can see women performing at very high levels of their sport, or you can watch men get beat up just in a lot of different formats. Cornhole gets very physical. No.
There's also British men's basketball, which is very low level.
They are not paying us enough for us to list what crap they have.
But they did recently update their TV app, so I'll give them that.
Thank you. That's true actually, because half of the services that we use for rugby don't. So
it's quite a good app.
It is a pretty good app.
The stream craps out.
Yeah. And I worry.
Which they tried to blame me about. My Wi-Fi's fine, thank you. It's you.
And she doesn't get to say that a lot.
No.
So with that, as always, thank you so much for joining us. If you stuck around this long, thank you so much. As always, we are always open for questions. Our next planned recording, we're not super duper sure of, but it will probably be
when something happens.
Yeah, it'll be when something happens. It will probably be covering when Pack 4 finishes, if not sooner. So you can get questions in about any of those competitions, any of your thoughts as well. You can reach all of us on socials that will probably be in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.
See you later.
Bye.